Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Township of Wainfleet Special Council meeting of March 8th, 2021 to order. And we'll start with the land acknowledgement statement. Begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people, acknowledging the One Bowl and Spoon Treaty. Is there any interest of pecuniary interest this evening? Okay, seeing none, we move right into our budgets, and I'd look to our treasurer to speak further on our budgets. So the floor is yours.
Okay, good evening, members of council, colleagues, and residents. Tonight I just have a few slides prepared to summarize the capital and operating budget proposals that have been discussed so far. So this represents a summary of the capital assets being recommended for replacement or repair in the 2021 budget year. So council had an opportunity to review the capital items in detail at our budget meeting last week. Following these slides, members of council will have a chance to address any additional questions or comments regarding any of the capital projects that were presented last week. So the capital program that council has supported over the past few years has put the township in a favorable position with respect to closing the infrastructure gap and committing to the aging infrastructure of the township. With continued progress, we are creating a financial footprint that will be relied upon for generations to come. So on this slide, you can see the 2021 increase to the infrastructure levy, which is compounding. So each year we add an additional 2% on top of the prior year's contributions. This was identified as one of the most efficient ways to increase capital contributions in an effort to close the gap. So this slide is a bit small, I apologize. But here we can see a snapshot of the operating budget with minor adjustments made to reflect Councillor Gilmore's motion at the previous budget meeting. So no further changes have been made to these figures. Staff believe that with all the present challenges, the estimates presented in this budget are reasonable and appropriate. The budget as presented is tempting to take a line-by-line approach. However, I would caution against these types of micro adjustments. I assure you that staff are diligent in monitoring their accounts throughout the year, always with the taxpayers and budget figures in mind. So although we might see a few line items overspent, there is likely a line item that was underspent as a cost containment measure to compensate for this overage. So throughout the year, as staff work to revise our account structures, close attention will be paid to ensure estimates presented are as reliable and as reasonable as possible. Although not all figures presented in this budget have a traditional inflationary component to them, it is best practice to keep your operational levies increasing consistent with inflation. So this slide outlines the percentage increase by levy as well as expressed as a blended rate at the bottom there. So these figures are calculated after growth. So the blended rate is a percentage increase the taxpayer can expect to see based on the proposed budget figures. So this slide is just an example of the levy increase using the average residential assessment. So 3.11% is the blended rate as the budget is proposed with the minor changes as identified earlier. So the last column there just shows so we're currently at 3.11%, and just another scenario, if we did increase to 3.5%, the difference there would be $17.50 annually. So that concludes the formal presentation, as there wasn't much direction to staff in terms of changing, so I would open the floor to council if anyone has any questions regarding the presentation, and then we can move into capital and operating discussions following that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Louie. And we will go right into questions of her, our treasurer. And who wants to begin? I'm looking at Councillor Cridlin first. I'm not seeing her hand up. Now I'm looking over to my left and right. And go ahead, anybody? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Okay. Okay, let's move on to capital. Okay, we'll move on to the capital budget, and we'll look to Ms. Louie again to speak to that, please.
So through the mayor to all of council, so I don't have anything additional to add, formally anyways, in terms of the capital budget. So the requests made of the department heads in terms of 10-year forecasts have been provided to council. So at this time, if there's any additional questions regarding any specific capital projects that have been proposed or any of the funding sources, then I would welcome any questions that either I can answer or we can direct to the requesting department.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Louie. And questions? Councillor McClellan.
Let her go.
Okay, Councillor Cridlin.
Thank you, Council and Mayor. So I'm just going to want to go through the bridge repairs line again. I think this is maybe the treasurer first. Thank you very much for the updated work and the sheet on the bridges. Very much appreciated. And again, recognizing we are now in a place to start really doing some great infrastructure work. So all that said, I don't see us, I think, planning to debenture much on the bridge repairs, which again, that's fine. But I wouldn't mind just a short discussion now on, is there one or two more other bridges? So I think what our operations manager has taken us to is a point of repair. You know, now my experience is it takes a long time to start moving this bridge effort. And what I've learned from the fire hall project is if we can commit to one or two more with some kind of proposal that maybe doesn't even impact the levy this year, or if it does, again, the treasurer can speak to that, but it adds one more bridge, whether we debenture it or not, that we commit to it this year so that next year we would see the payment start to you know, be included. I'm not sure if that's clear. I can leave it at that and ask the treasurer if that's enough just to get started. Thank you.
So through the mayor to Councillor Cridlin. So just to be sure that I understand your request. So on project number 3, as identified, there is the replacement of Gents Road that's being proposed. However, there is some maintenance work to extend the life on 4 or 5 other bridges here. Do you mean potentially increasing that number to add a couple additional bridges to that list? Because we have put forward in the budget the number as proposed here. So we are planning on doing the work on all of those bridges, not just the Gents Road.
Thank you, Mayor. May I continue then?
Certainly, go ahead.
So yes, it is what you've got there, but it would appear to me that most of these are more maintenance type of activities. And they're smaller than the list that was provided then recently. If I look at, let's say, Meisner Road Bridge, you know, the estimate is larger than what we have in our budget books. And I'm really just wanting to get into the bridge repairs, either committing this year, where we then continue the work next year, or we add one this year if we can fit it in, and perhaps a levy or not this year. So yes, it's all of these plus. Is there another maybe 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, the next big bridge that can be completed as opposed to repaired?
Perhaps we could bring our operations manager in on this. Richard, are you there?
Yes, sir. Through your worship, yeah, we are planning the next bridge that we're scheduling is actually a joint bridge between ourselves and West Lincoln. It went for previous tender a year ago. It came in over budget, and West Lincoln nor ourselves had the financing available. So that is scheduled for next year, which would be the Pearson, and our portion of that rehab is $436,600. We are also planning next year on doing Dixie Road Bridge repairs. And that's, which one is it here? Sorry, I'm just trying to find my sheet. That's 86,000. And that, again, that's some railing work or structural railing for guide rail instead of what we have there now. And then additional to that, we are hoping next year to finish the Melawani. This year we broke it up in 2 phases. Melawani Bridge, for instance, we want to do the erosion protection, which is the most important thing in our books right now. And then the following year, we want to add to the railing portion and replace the railing. We're trying to keep it, so we're replacing one bridge and doing minor repairs to extend the life at the same time. And we're hoping to actually continue down this path as we go. We're trying to get the worst ones out of the way and protect our best ones at the same time from getting any further deterioration. If that answers your question.
Yep. Councillor Cridlin, follow up.
Thank you. So again, really the question is this the year to add, and again, maybe it's Treasury, to add one more bridge to this basket. So I'll leave it at, that'll be the last on that, and maybe the Treasurer can just say, no, this is full enough, and we really can't either finance it or levy another bridge this year, in which case I'm looking for that next year.
Okay, I'll look to the Treasurer.
Through the Mayor to Councillor Cridlin. So certainly if Council chooses to add additional projects, we could investigate potential funding sources, and if there was appetite to increase the capital tax levy, then we could certainly undertake additional projects pending that Richard thinks they would physically be able to complete all of these projects. So basically the ones that he's proposed, I've used his expertise that these are the ones that should be done this year. But certainly if we wanted to add additional funds, that staff will take council's direction on that.
Thank you. I'm just going to leave it like that then till we get through the rest of the discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I looked at this and I was actually impressed. It was fairly ambitious. That's quite a bit. If I could just tack on there for a second, Councillor Cridlin. Richard, how long will it take us in years to rejuvenate all our bridges, either by replacing or fixing? You know, we're doing, what are we at here, 5 this year? How long will that take us to get all 19 fixed?
Through your worship, I mean, we're still looking at forecasting over a 20-year period. We have to start breaking these up. So again, when it's time to replace them in the future, we don't want to do them all at once again. But we definitely do have some major bridges coming forward in the future. The issue becomes is every year prices increase, whether it's manpower, whether it's materials. We don't, again, want to replace all the bridges at the same time. We want to space them out. So we're trying to extend the life on some, repair others that are in our best shape. Like, for instance, the quarry is our newest one. And that's why we want to make sure we can maintain that one by putting the erosion protection this year. But we're looking at some major expenses and some major bridge work over the next 10 years. Okay,
thank you. You have it basically mapped out, a roadmap of when and you know, like a timetable set out, do you? Or are we just kind of waiting and then we'll get these ones done, then we'll reassess next year? Yeah,
through your worship, I mean, we do have the list of timelines when they should be replaced. Again, you're not going to pick like the $2 million in the first year. You're going to go after, we're trying to space them out so we can get the best bang for our buck. Now, whether we set $1 million per year, we can pick and choose on repairs and replacements at the same time so we get the biggest bang for our buck, but still make it affordable to our constituents as far as our spending goes. So we'll try and span them out, but we definitely are going to be looking for upwards of what we are this year in the next few years as well, moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cridlin, any further follow-up? No. Okay, thank you. Councillor McClellan, you had the your hand up there for a question.
I think it got answered while we were talking about this, but Richard has laid this out in over 10 years where in today's dollars we're at $6.4 million worth of bridges, right? So in 10 years' time, that might be $7.5 or $8 million, right, by the time we get there, depending on how things go. But he is right, you have to do the maintenance because it doesn't just go up by the cost of living, it goes up huge.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, please, of the treasurer or the CAO? Councillor Gilmore?
Thank you, Mayor. This is for Richard, actually. Regarding Project 7 guardrail, Richard, I'm curious what the rationale for the deferral of doing some guardrails to 2020 is. Maybe you covered it, but I just was curious.
Through your worship, again, we're trying to keep the financing within a tolerable limit. I mean, I would love to come in with you and say, if you give me another $1 million, I'll go ahead and continue more projects. But again, overall, we're trying to get some bridge work done, some guide rails done. We're trying to pick the worst and that we can sustain in the financial needs that we personally right now have.
Okay, well, I'm just curious whether it might be prudent if you're having trouble getting a contractor to come or seek one out that maybe doesn't want to come for a small job and do this new guardrail that might be cheaper, if it might be better to throw more projects in a bundle and just fund it out of the infrastructure levy and get it over with. It's a bit of a safety issue, some of that. I just want to make sure that they're not tied to some bridge repair that you were deferring to 2022.
Through your worship, now the ones that are on the guide rail replacement list aren't tied with the bridges. We're keeping them separate, and most of these that are on the list are actually, a lot of them have to do with the CP rail crossings, where we have the approaches are elevated and coming down the other side. Phillips, Hewitt, they're all that section. Lakeshore is partial replacement and partial removal. It was defined in our roads need study. There's a section that didn't require the guardrail, but there's a cable there now. But there is a section that needs to be extended at the corner of Bessie to meet the new to meet the standards. But yeah, I reached out to 3 different contacts so far regarding the new style guide rail that was suggested, and I still haven't received any word back.
So if it was cost effective down the road and someone wanted more work in order to do what you needed done, I suppose we could revisit this later in the year if we wanted to fund it midstream. I mean, that's possible. Anything, I assume, is possible.
So through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore. So yeah, anything that wouldn't require taxes to be levied for can be approved outside of the budget approval process. So if, for example, Richard was to move forward with the couple projects that are identified and someone put forward a tender that was significantly lower in cost than we maybe had budgeted, then I think at that time when the tender came before council for approval and to award the tender, at that point we could then potentially put more funds towards that to utilize the cost savings and just direct that to be used from the infrastructure levy at that time.
Okay, that's good. Councillor Gilmore, further? Okay, Councillor McClellan.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Richard again. Richard, on these guardrails, I'm going to ask you a question I'm not sure I really want to know the answer to, but how many places in town really should have guardrails? Because what you're doing is replacing what's there and broken now that don't have any. And what is our liability for that, if any?
Through your worship, to Councillor McClellan, I apologize. I don't have my road safety study handy with me right now. It'll take me a little bit of time to pull it up on the computer. But what we did was we took the roads needs or the safety study, and we picked the worst locations with the largest liability, and those are the ones we have listed. And we're trying to pick them off in order of severity. But there are other locations as well. But I apologize, I don't have it open in front of me to be able to give you the amount of locations.
Okay, so that was, I was just trying to follow Council Gilmore's line, is if you need 4 kilometers to entice somebody to come here, if that's there and that's what we have to do, we should be getting that done so we're covering ourselves and making the road safer for the traveling public. And that'll get you a contractor that might give you a better price because it's worth his while coming here instead of a day's work here and a day's work there.
Okay, Richard, any comment on that? I mean, that just makes sense. You know, you bigger job, better price per unit. So
yeah, I'd be. I mean, again, the budget was prepared with a a financing strategy from staff, and I mean, we can definitely add, but I would probably reach out to Mallory and to see how that where we would add any locations again.
Councilor McClellan, carry on.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, again to Richard. We had a conversation earlier today about a couple of bridges, and we don't have to name them, but do you have some contingency funds tucked away in case we do run into problems on them?
Through your worship, there is a contingency built into the one estimate. We don't know exactly what's going to happen because the bridges that we probably we can name them. They're the fiberglass bridges, and it's not. I mean, it's not a new method what we're going to be doing. The issue becomes is the bridges themselves, how they were originally built. The method for stripping and waterproofing is not a new method. It's normal practice. The issue becomes is we have to be very careful when we strip these bridges that we don't damage the fiberglassing on the decking itself. So there is a contingency built into the number, but as far as if we find anything major, that'll be something that we would definitely have to review with council at the time.
Okay, thank you. Further, Councilor McClellan? Okay, other questions, please? No. Councilor Gilmore, go ahead.
Just a more long-range general question about capital. When I add up these pages here, minus the fire hall, I get about 15 million in 10 years. And I'm curious if at some point, not tonight or any time in the next week or so, but if we can get a rough revenue forecast for the infrastructure levy based on where it's at right now and continuing the 2% progress payment during the same time period, so that at the end we can add or subtract the numbers and see whether we're ahead, behind, or even.
So through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore, yes, we can definitely prepare those forecasts and share them with council.
Okay, thank you. Further questions, comments? Councillor Cridland.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I certainly echo the request that Councillor Gilmore's put forward. That's fantastic. And then just, I think it would be included in there. However, we talked about the 2 fire halls, 3 and 4. I did get lots of information since we met, or we all did. So thank you for that. But what's needed next from a study standpoint? I mean, the report suggests that we're catching up from a report from 2015 and getting these items caught up. The new fire hall is, certainly closer than it's ever been. So, what's the timing for the next study? I would I would like to see a study done sooner than later before we have to see 50 and 70 put forward in next year's budget. So, 50 and 70 this year is okay because it's very clear it's catching up on 2015 work. But then I'd like to reset what's required out of those two stations and what is it that we need to have that in front of us.
Okay, thank you. I think
that's probably for the chief.
The chief is online, so I'll ask the chief to speak to that, please.
Good evening. Through Mayor. Certainly, if council requests, we can undertake an updated study, whether it be a simple gap analysis of the previous studies and what has been completed and what's left, or we can undertake a whole new, whether it be another building assessment similar to what was done by Kalos Engineering, or we can undertake a whole new master fire plan. I think at this point that's a discussion that council can have and strategically where they want to move forward.
Councillor Cridlin, follow up.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I wouldn't mind hearing from the other councillors whether that's something that I don't know what the cost is, but I would take out the rural water supply and budget for a study in the next 12 months. So we have that in front of us so that we know where we're going from there. So not increasing the levy, but maybe that's something in terms of planning that might be a better spend. So any other comments on that? And thank you.
Okay, thank you. I look to Chief. Do you have anything to speak to that first? And then I'll go to Councillor McClellan.
Yeah, certainly. My experience is that any studies, specifically master fire plans, 10,000 would not cover it. So there would have to be an increase there. Some of the smaller studies I'll refer to Richard when the building assessment was completed. I don't remember what those numbers were for that study, but certainly that can be looked into.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that's where I was going to go. The studies that Richard has given us and Morgan has given us don't include either Wellandport or Burnaby, anything on those buildings. Don't include any money that will be spent on the fire hall over here when it's emptied out. So our 15 million could be pushing anywhere from 17 to 20 million, depending on what we come up with. So that's where I'd like to know where we're going so that the money is there and we build it, and whatever council walks in isn't sitting here saying, wow, those guys didn't leave us any money. Nobody was thinking, right? That's what we were put here for, so, right? So.
Okay, I know the treasurer's always working on reserves and into the future, so would you be able to respond, Ms. Louie?
Yeah, so through the mayor to Councillor McClellan. So I don't have any specifics in terms of the numbers that are coming forward from that study on those specific facilities. I'm not sure if either the chief or Richard can comment on that. But certainly the numbers that the forecast that we create when we share that with council should hopefully give a clearer picture on how we plan to tackle this 15, 17, 18, whatever the number lands on once we have some updated studies, whatever that number ends up being. Hopefully then it'll be a little bit easier to see when it's laid out on paper exactly how we plan on achieving those infrastructure needs.
Carry on, Councilor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure that we need to do a study. I'm sure between Morgan and Richard, they can look at the size of the machines that are coming. They can look at the building and say, well, we need to build a new building, or we need to put an addition on, or they need washrooms and they need larger doors, and we need one more bay to the side. And, that's $150,000 instead of $1 million on for an addition instead of a new build. So, and $1 million won't do it, but that's just my thought. It could more or less be in-house. I don't think we need a whole new fire master plan, because we'll find out everything we did today is still no good because the guy wants to spend more money. So,
yeah. Chief, do you have a comment there?
No, I'm listening to Councillor McClellan and agreeing with a majority of what he's saying.
Okay, thank you.
Wow, that's a,
It's really hard to predict into the future, that is for sure, and,
yeah, that usually doesn't happen. Thanks, Morgan.
okay, any other further discussion or questions? Councillor Cridland?
Thank you. So I'm just going to close that off. I think then we changed the conversation from a study official to something will happen in this next 12 months that will set us up for if there's an ask for, or what the ask is going to be for Fire Hall 3 and 4 before budget time. And is that reasonable then from the chief and manager operations?
Chief?
If council directs staff, if you want us to undertake that, then certainly we can. We would do our best to accomplish that.
Well, I'd like to move that if somebody would like to second it. Thank you.
Okay, it's moved and seconded by Councillor Van Vliet. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, I guess I have to do this. Councillor McClellan?
In favor.
Councillor Van Vliet?
In favor.
Councillor Gilmore?
Favor.
Councillor Cridland?
In favor, thank you.
And I'm in favor. That's unanimous. Okay, other questions, discussion on our budget? If there are no further questions or discussion, I do have a motion that is in front of me that we can read to pass the budget this evening if you like. Yes, you're right. It's blacked out, or almost blacked out. I can't see it. Yeah. Operating, Councillor Cridland.
Sorry, did we finish then the capital then? Or we?
Well, do
this
you
is
have
about
anything?
capital still.
Do you have anything
Well,
more for capital?
There was quite a bit of discussion on the roadside mower assembly, and maybe let me just confirm what I think we've got approved. We've got funding approved, and there's going to be something that comes back that provides us with a option for purchase versus tender for services. So is that where we landed with the Project 10?
Okay, I'll look to the treasurer.
So through the mayor to Councillor Cridland, no, so it has been removed from the 2021 budget. We did list it here because it was, Richard did identify it as a need. However, with all of the other projects that came forward, this one was identified as being able to wait until 2022. So no formal approval is being made for this item. It will come forward again next year for council's consideration. So you're not tying your hands for next year in terms of this project. It will come back before council for approval again next year.
Thank you very much for that. And if I could just clarify then, Mayor, on item number 22, the baseball diamond backstop item number 23, again, we're going to see more on that if and when those funds are finally approved through the grant process.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McClellan.
So just to go back to Project 10, if we're not going to buy them this year, how much is it going to cost us to keep them running? If they're that beat, I mean, I don't want to see us put $15,000 in each of them to find out next year we've got to replace them anyway, right? It's not like you're throwing good money after bad, right? So I don't know if Richard has
Richard or probably Richard on that one. Richard.
Through your worship, again, it was identified. Like again, we were trying to keep financings within check. That's why we suggested postponing this one to next year. I mean, it does need to be replaced. I mean, that's why it's presented. But again, it's we're hoping to get one more year out of it just to keep the the financing in check. We did do some investigating. If I recall, Councilor McClellan, you asked hours wise. We do put 587 hours roughly on each piece of equipment, each mower, and I did reach out to get some costing for rental units and just a arm mower itself with a flail, the cost is $9,500 a month.
Okay, thank you. How's that compared to just $9,500 a month compared to just, the purchase of one?
9 months, round number. Right. My other question is just what's the cost to sub it out?
Okay, ask.
Right, we did that once before, and because nobody wanted to cut the grass, so
Are you interested in asking Richard to do some research on that for the future, or do you?
that question's been asked and never answered.
Okay, do you wish to ask it again? And
Sure, I'd love to know
let's
that.
ask it again.
Yeah. So could we get some information on what it would cost to sub that out?
Richard?
Through your worship, yeah, we have been trying to put numbers together as the year progressed with everything that's been going on. But I do recall, I'm trying to remember, I thought I did get a price on roadside mowing, and I'm just trying to find it actually. No, I believe the price we got was for grass cutting in cemeteries. We didn't get a response back from roadside mowing.
Okay, well, so that's, Councillor McClellan has asked that question again. So perhaps, Richard, we can do that still. Find some estimates for tendering it out, and so that we can compare it to the cost of purchasing and doing all that ourselves. I'm very curious about that as well, to see if that's more economical. Councillor Cridland.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Just one more clarification as well on fleet project number 11. We did have discussion on whether we debenture maybe 100,000 more than what's there and leave the reserve. Could the treasurer then, or through you to the treasurer, could you please confirm where we ended up landing after that discussion? Thank you.
Through the mayor to Councillor Cridland. So at the last meeting, it was just discussion, so no formal changes have been made to this. However, if council wishes to change the financing for this project, then we can certainly do that. We will, if we do increase the portion that we debenture, once the central station comes on board, we will be above the 10%. So council would have to waive our internal policy, our internal debt policy, which limits us to 10%.
Okay, follow up, Councillor Cridland.
Through you, thank you, treasurer. I think I was missing that 10% ceiling piece of information through the last discussion. So I'm going to just leave it at that then. Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor McClellan.
Yeah, so I think at the last one, I asked that maybe we could put this on hold till we had a final price on the fire hall, so get it out to tender and see what it comes back at. And if it's in budget, then just order it up, and whether it's now or September, you're still gonna get it next year. So I don't know if we can do that, and that way we'll see where we sit finance-wise. I know we need this thing, so it's just a matter of...
Yeah, my understanding is it won't fit in any of the old buildings, so we have to wait until we have the new fire hall. And my understanding is it'll take about a year to get it.
So that's
So in theory, they may time out somewhat close. I don't know. So, Chief, any comments?
Yeah, again, the intent of this project now is so that way we can still make sure that our citizens are provided coverage from all stations that are in operation. As I've previously reported, Engine 2 at Station 2 no longer is recognized. So the idea here would be that, we could move Engine 3 to Station 2, knowing that Station 3 is going to be in operation for a longer period. Then we would have that truck there. And then when the new station come on, then we would purchase a vehicle to go to that hall, knowing that we would be able to fit a newer vehicle into the new station. It's kind of a stopgap measure to make sure that we still have coverage at all the stations and continue to space out our fleet.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McClellan, follow up?
Yeah, I'd still say leave it till we get our prices. They'll get it built. We'll have it. It's just, if this fire hall comes back and it's $1 million more than we think, right about now, I think we're done fighting over it. It's just gonna be get it built.
Well, you know what? If it's even inflation has killed it and it's now 5 million or whatever, if we wait more, it's going to be
No,
7
that's
million.
what I'm saying. So
It's-
let's wait and see what it comes in at and how bad it is before we order this. Like I say, whether you order it in April or you order it in September, it's not gonna be that big a deal.
So we want
Still
to,
gonna keep the other truck. We were told last meeting, we're gonna keep it as a spare, so, you know, it's not recognized, but we're gonna use it anyway, so, you know.
so your direction here then is to ask the chief to delay the ordering
Get all
of
his
this
quotes,
truck.
you get everything, just don't order it till we're ready to go, right?
Chief, comments?
Yeah, so to talk about that spare, again, remembering that trucks are only good for 20 years as frontline apparatus. You can still use them as reserve pieces up to 25 years. That's the intent here. We also want to make sure that we're spacing our trucks out. If we delay any further, we're just going to continue to push these trucks. And this is exactly what we ran into in 2018, when in that year we did 3 at the same year. And that becomes very costly when in 20 years we have to do that all over again. So the idea here is, we do 1 truck this year, we wait, the station gets completed, we do another truck in 2023, and we continue spacing. And this is a way to make sure that all the stations still have adequate apparatus to provide coverage, and we're still financially spacing our trucks out so that we can afford them when it comes time to replace them.
Okay, that's sound logic to me. Further comments, Councillor McClellan?
No, sir.
Okay, Councillor Gilmore?
Thank you, Mayor. This has no levy impact anyway. At this point, and if it takes a year to build it, you're not gonna, well, you're gonna draw on some of the debenture probably, but it may not even be exercised till next year. Is that right?
Yeah, so through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore, yeah, so since none of this is actually being funded through the tax levy, we would likely just pay for this up front when we were required to make payment on the vehicle, and the debenture payments don't start till the year following, so we would end up having that debenture payment in next year's budget, but this could certainly be approved now as presented in the budget. The chief could order, we could make payment when it arrives, or if we have some more sound quotes come in as the fire hall project proceeds, we could certainly approve something. Like, it's going to go through the tender process and be before council anyways, and it is all funded outside of the tax levy, so it could certainly be approved at that point and funded as identified here, or potentially slightly different depending on what costs come in at.
So once it's gone out for tender and the tender comes back to us, then at that point we can delay it a couple of months if we so choose at that point anyway. But at this point, it's a matter of getting the ball rolling, and it has no impact on really what we're talking about. Where it's going to have an impact is when the fire hall comes in over, we're going to have to trigger the 10%. I'm with Councillor McClellan. I think we're going to have to make an adjustment there, unfortunately, anyway. But we don't know that either, so there's lots we don't know.
Yes, that's for sure. Further comments, discussion? Looking at Councillor Cridlin, no. Okay, shall we move on to operating then? Ms. Louie, anything for operating?
Yeah, so through the mayor to all of council. So again, nothing formally prepared in terms of operating. Just as I mentioned in the brief slide deck that I had prepared. So staff do believe that the estimates, they've assessed the risks associated with some of the figures in the budget, and they do believe that the estimates prepared are appropriate. And as mentioned, staff do endeavor to keep a close eye on all of expenses this year to ensure that we can really get a good grasp of each budget line and what is made up of that. So we do We do promise to continue working towards the reliability of these numbers, but at this point, staff do believe that they are the most appropriate to bring forward.
Thank you. And questions? Councillor Cridland.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't even think I had my hand up quite yet, but that's great. I just want to acknowledge again all the work that's gone into bringing so much more information. I mean, I know we always are looking for more, and I think that's really just a compliment of how much you're actually giving us. We actually know what to ask for, and we've learned a lot through this budget process, again, because of the information. I know Councillor Gilmore's already commented that, but I did want to add my thanks to the work that's gone in to have so much information in front of us this time. And then my only little tweak, and I'll probably do it a couple more times yet, is please continue on those accounting things. And I would still, at the end of all this, perhaps we, again, formalize what kind of financial information the treasurer will be able to provide us, maybe through the 2021 cycle. So understanding there's lots of pressures, understanding a lot of work's already been done on this. As a council, we'll probably always continue to ask for more. So I don't have any other issues with the actual operating budget. I think it's great. So once again, thank you for all the work.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cridland. Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would say the same thing, that I would like to thank everybody for all the work that goes into this. I realize how much work this is. I have one as a comment, just for clarification for people watching. Any grant money that the township receives, we don't get to say how we get to spend that. It's right in the grant that tells us how to spend it, like the park across the road. That was not taxpayer money, that was grant money. And it was under the Main Street Revitalization Fund, I think it was. Just so everybody knows, we don't, as a council, determine how that money gets spent. We get told how it gets spent. And the other thing I wanted to say is about the fair, or the Wainfleet Agricultural Society. I had a good discussion with them today. And I'm just wondering if we could recognize the $4,066 that they have requested in kind, in case the fair does happen to happen. Am I off that base, Mel? You're looking at me funny.
So through the mayor to Councillor Van Vliet, so certainly we can add anything into the budget at council's direction. And yes, if that won't actually turn into anything if the fair does not take place, but certainly at your direction we can add that back into the budget.
If we could, they're not sure what's going to happen this year. They have to make a decision by April. I can't remember the date. And the other portion we talked about was tables and such, which they're going to work out. So I just wanted to recognize that we did reach out to them and that they're a Wainfleet-based thing.
Thank you, Councillor Van Vliet. And I'm going to be meeting with them sometime within the next month and start to work to develop a better relationship, or a more communicative relationship. The fair and Marshville Festival are really all we have here, and they're treasured and they're historic, and it's important that we work together with everybody to keep those things happening. So I am going to reach out to them shortly here and have hopefully a sit down with them in person within the next month. So so we're asking for $4,000 to be added in on the fair line. That's what, was it 4,000?
In kind, but...
In kind, so but it still has to be
yeah,
accounted for. Mallory, are we able to do that?
Yeah, so through the mayor to all of council, so yeah, can you just remind me of that amount, because I don't have my grant sheet in front of me here.
$4,066.
We can certainly add that back, and if there's any other recommendations or suggestions, then I'll just keep updating this document. And if council is comfortable by the end of our discussions, then we can prepare a draft motion for council's consideration once we've taken into consideration all of the comments from council.
Thanks, Mel.
Okay, is everybody in favor of adding that back in? Is there anyone opposed? Councillor
Mayor?
Cridland? Councillor
I
Cridland.
think I'm just going to ask for a point of order.
Okay, go ahead.
On the grants. So I know that that came up last time. We had voted unanimously to leave that at zero for a bunch of reasons at the time. I am completely sympathetic to obviously our fair and our heritage festival, but we went across the board with everything. And I think Councillor Van Vliet even mentioned that, all of this is tenuous for even the fair. So I'd like to make sure that this comes back as a reconsideration through whatever the procedure is for us to then bring this back as a reconsideration and have it noted that way, please.
Okay, thank you. So you're making a reconsideration. I'm going to look to the CAO for comment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess I'd propose there are two ways to do this. One is sort of setting aside an allocation in the budget for grants. And notwithstanding the decision by council not to award grants to specific associations or groups, the sort of decision to stick some money in the budget to provide grants, I think is separate and apart from the actual awarding of it. So if, for example, council was at a point where it wanted to include some money in the budget, in these budget deliberations you're going through right now, I believe you would be safe to do so without having to go through reconsideration. The actual decision to actually offer an in-kind grant, based on the fact that you did make that decision in the past, would require reconsideration at a future date. But at this stage, for budgetary purposes, if you want to put 4,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever into the budget, I think you're free to do that without needing to go through the reconsideration. The reconsideration would apply to the actual awarding of the grant or the granting of the in-kind transfer, if you will. That would be my suggestion, but again, it is your will as a body of council to go one way or the other. So
I think that's obviously wise because we don't know if it's going to happen or yet not happen or not. So if we allocate on paper 4,066, and then it would be a reconsideration so that it meets Councillor Cridland's request. In the future, if the fair did happen, then we could bring that back and do a reconsideration on that. Does that make sense, Mr. CAO? That's exactly what you said. So can we plug that number in? Is everybody okay with that? No? Councillor McClellan?
We said no, and I don't think we should reconsider it. What about everybody else that asked?
Okay.
We're all going to come back and say, well, what about me?
Okay. Other comments on that?
I hate to be hard, but that's what we did, right?
Yep. Councillor Cridland?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Again, thank you, CAO, for the procedural clarification. So what I think I heard, though, was, we will assign an amount that's not, it is not attached to the fair. So that's materially different to me. So we can say no to the fair tomorrow because it's not for the fair. And that meets the decision aspect of what we have already done for the grants for the year. So our grants policy does allow us to make exceptions. So we've seen that happen already once. I'm okay with an amount being set aside in the event that there's a request this year. Again, I think that's okay for me. So maybe we haven't heard from Councillor Gilmore if he's got some thoughts on how to proceed with doing the right thing here.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cridland, and I'll look to Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, it's a fee waiver, basically. So if you want to assign some amount under the heading of potential fee waivers, then I'm all right with that too. because it may or may not even be required, like unfortunately lots of other things that I complain about. But let's assign them out for fee waivers, and then you're covered. Pick a number that you like. It's immaterial, because if the fair doesn't happen, it won't matter. Do we have to levy it? Like, why can't?
Yeah, so through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore, so it is levied because there are still expenses associated, like, so for example, our fees are calculated based on cost recovery. So the rental of the facility is to cover the cost. So there would be a revenue and expense line associated with these rentals. So we would have to, unfortunately, record an expense, which would then increase the levy. So, for example, if we wanted to put $6,000 away for any asks that might come of council throughout the year, then if it was going to be considered outside of the grant policy, we could just add it to the grant line, or as you identified at the previous meeting, that some of that money is traditionally unspent, so potentially we could just increase that slightly, knowing that if we have a request or two come forward, council would have the opportunity to consider those as they come forward. Because I would caution against, it's fine to say that we're suspending the grant program for this year because of financial reasons, but it's not fine if we do that and 5 people come forward with requests of council, and throughout the year they all get approved, because now we have expenses that we haven't accounted for. So it's if we are sticking to the that they are suspended this year, then that's perfectly acceptable. That's council's decision, and we definitely take your direction on that. However, if you did want to have the opportunity and some flexibility to maybe approve some of these one-off requests, if, let's say, some of the restrictions lax a little bit and some of these events, be it smaller scale, maybe were able to take place, that council would have the opportunity to approve a fee waiver for something like that.
Okay, well, let's do this then. We still have $2,000 left in miscellaneous grants and donations. Council, let's reduce council legal by $5,000. We didn't spend any last year, and let's not do anything stupid. And we'll have $5,000 and put that in a line for fee waivers under mayor and council. How will that? And then we'd have potentially $7,000 between what I left in miscellaneous grants and donation of $2,000 plus if you reduce the legal by $5,000, that can sit there. Does that make any sense?
So through the mayor.
Sorry,
through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore. So just to confirm, we are going to reduce the legal counsel line, or the proposal is to reduce the legal counsel line by $5,000,
right? And
then to just reallocate that $5,000 up into the gifts and promotions, which would give council the opportunity to, we can at a later time break out to a special account or to a different account line, so that we don't next year wonder why we increase that if it remains unspent as the year goes on. But for the sake of coming up with a figure this evening, I will just add it on to that gifts and promotions line.
Right, actually, and you already reduced it by 2,000, so it would go from 18 to 13 in the 2021 draft. The very far right column is actually, it did come down a bit in light of the fact we spent nothing last year. So that would be 13, and the other number would go from 2 to 7. And then if we have to switch it back, we can switch it back. It's just, but we don't need another line for another year, because I don't imagine we'll continue this zero policy into another year. It'll go back to not the same, but some form of what we've been doing. That's my vision anyway.
Yeah, so through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore. So yeah, the only reason that I was suggesting to create a new line is just because as soon as we start putting one-time expenses through regular accounts, it kind of muddies the waters in terms of being able to rely on historical data. So if we break that out and it's unspent, the next council won't wonder what the heck happened with this. Why did they increase it by 5,000 and they still didn't spend anything? So it'll just be a little clearer as to what our intent was, and to know to identify that as a one-off expense, and that's likely not to carry forward to the next year.
Okay, well, that's fine, whatever, as long as we know that there's now $7,000 there available if something happens.
Okay, that's good insurance there, and it does give us a little flexibility if need be. And I'm going to look to Councillor Cridlin, please.
Thank you, and I do appreciate the discussion and seeing what we're trying to do for our community here. But we're making, like, we're changing our minds on grants. So as much as it's come, that's what I'm hearing. So if we put it in a column or a new column, I know why, and I respect that. But I mean, we might as well just put it in the grants line again, and that's where it is. And we've decided that we may have these. I like that it was classified the revenue neutral or the waived fees. I think that's a good criteria to add to that. That's all we're considering tonight, is perhaps a fee waiver application that may come in. And again, anybody out there now, that any residents that are wanting to reapply, why wouldn't they all like to reapply if this is what we're doing tonight? So I'm not comfortable with where we've landed, but I guess it's not an easy decision. I just assume it just be in the grant line if that's where we're going to land, and it's going to make more sense when we look back on it. I think the treasurer's right. If we start adding one-offs, we're not going to know what we did.
Okay, thank you. And I look to Ms. Louie.
So through the mayor to Councillor Cridlin. So if we create a new line, we still will be able to identify what it is. I think the objective here is that we're not necessarily allocating these funds to a specific group. So it's kind of just funds that have been set aside that at any time in the future, if someone comes forward with a request of council through correspondence or whatever, it wouldn't be through the traditional grant and donation policy at this point. It would be a one-off ask, and at that point, it would come down to a vote of council. So everyone would have a decision. A decision still would need to be made in terms of whether or not we would support the request that came before council. So it is just making sure that if we have requests that come forward, there's an opportunity to consider them without actually saying that these funds are going to be for grants and we're earmarking this for this group and this for this group. So it's just giving the opportunity to council as opposed to creating the allocations like we traditionally do in the policy.
Thank you for that clarification. So somebody want to make a motion then, maybe?
Yeah, I think we probably need a motion on this because we're a little bit split. So I think Councillor Van Vliet brought this forward. So if you would like to make the motion and have a seconder on that.
Sure, I'll make the motion that we move 4,066. Sorry, we recognize it, but then we move. What were we moving?
No, it was 7,000.
No.
Well, I'll look to you, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I believe Councillor Gilmore suggested $5,000 be deleted from the council legal account and be reestablished in a fee waiver or equivalent account for potential use throughout the year at some point.
Okay, so Councillor Gilmore makes that motion, and I need a seconder, Councillor Van Vliet, and any other discussion? Any questions on that? Okay, I'll do the recorded vote. Councillor McClellan in favor or opposed? In favor. Councillor Van Vliet?
In favor.
Councillor Gilmore?
Favor.
Councillor Cridlin?
In favor.
And I am in favor, so that is done. Okay, thank you. Moving on to, we're still in operational, moving on to any other discussion or questions within the operational budget. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Go ahead, Councillor McClellan. Microphone.
Sorry, I had a quick chat with the treasurer earlier, but we have a tree fund. I would like to see that before it gets nickeled and dimed down to nothing, because we've pulled money out of it, but I'd like to see X number of dollars. We can decide what it is put towards trees, and the remainder go into the infrastructure fund so that it goes there and we know it's there and it helps build it up. So that's, I know that'll probably come later in the year, but I'd like to make sure that's kind of noted that that's where it's going, and we can all think about how much we want to put towards trees in the community, and maybe Richard can come up with a number that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we've it's been some time since we've had that discussion, or I've had that discussion with the CAO and treasurer. So I'll look to the treasurer for comment on that, where it is now.
Yeah, so through the Mayor to all of Council, so we did receive those funds in 2020, so they have been identified on the draft reserve schedule that was prepared with this budget. So once the 2020 audit is complete, which is scheduled, I believe, at the beginning of July, then a report will come forward with a recommendation for those funds. So at this point, we've kind of just identified them on their own separate lines so that council could see that those funds are there. And staff will make a recommendation following year end, depending what the 2020 figures look like, and staff will look for council direction in terms of implementing some sort of program to with the tree funds. And if council has a recommendation in terms of what they want to see happen with the rest of the funds, then staff take council's direction on that.
Is that sufficient, Councillor McClellan?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions before we get into the vital step of voting on our budget? Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the one thing that I'd like to propose is, when I do the numbers from the fire department, the roads, the bridges, we're at $15+ million of today's money, plus we have buildings and work that nobody's accounted for to date, so there may be another million or two hidden away in there. I know we're at 3.11. I'm going to ask that maybe we round it to 3.5 and the extra goes into the infrastructure so that we do have some more money in here. It's, I don't know, I just worry there's not going to be enough to get this done.
Okay, so Councillor McClellan is asking that we land at 3.5% as opposed to 3.11 as it stands right now, and the additional funds be added to our infrastructure levy to help assist us as we move forward with the enormous amount of money that we have to spend on roads, bridges, etc. Is there a discussion on that? Is that a motion? You want to make that as a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make that as a motion. So.
Okay, can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Van Vliet seconds it. And can we have discussion? Councillor Van Vliet.
I have a quick question for Mallory.
Is your mic on?
Yeah. Do we know what that number would be then? How much we would be adding into the infrastructure levy if we upped it by 0.4%?
So through the mayor to Councillor Van Vliet, so to have the blended rate land around 3.5%, we would be able to add almost a full percentage point to the municipal levy. So we'd be able to add $60,000 to the infrastructure levy, and that will land our blended rate at 3.497.
Thank you.
Okay, so that motion is on the floor. Further discussion? And that is truly planning for the future. It will definitely help us as we move forward with the 19 bridges that need repair, the roads, the ditches, everything like that, and build our infrastructure levy at the same time. So it's very forward-looking for the future of the township, and really help us, put us in good financial stead as we move forward. Any other discussion? Councillor Cridland.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. You know, for the public, that's an amount, or for all of us, that's an amount that's actually kind of undesignated as of tonight's budget. So we've gone through capital. It's going to be part of the capital. But with all the projects we've listed right now, we're more or less saying we're at capacity for the work. This is going to help us basically for next year's projects and future projects. So it's not earmarked for a specific project as we land on it then tonight. Is that what I'm hearing?
So through the mayor to Councillor Cridland. So essentially, yes. So we are drawing on the infrastructure levy quite a bit for this capital budget. So instead of reducing the amount that we're drawing, we're actually just contributing because it's compounding. So the 60,000 that we're adding this year, if we just reduce the reserve the amount of reserves that we're using to fund capital, then it's 60,000 the end. But if we contribute it into the infrastructure levy, then it's 60,000 this year, and we're building on that 60,000 in our base figure next year and the year after. So the 60,000 is going a lot farther if we do it that way. So technically undesignated, however, there are a number of projects proposed in this budget that are being funded through that infrastructure levy.
Okay, follow up, Councillor Cridland.
Mayor, if I could just continue.
Yes, please.
So thank you. Thank you for that, Treasurer. And again, I think one of your earlier slides did have it where that number on an individual's budget would be in the range of about $17 for the average assessment in the township. Do I recall that correctly from the beginning of the meeting?
So through the mayor to Councillor Cridland, so yes, you do recall that. The $17.50 though was the difference between the 3.11% and the 3.5%. So I believe the figures were $139 was the increase with the 3.11% to the average tax bill. And when we take the 3.11 up to the 3.5, it goes up to 157. So the difference there is the $17.50. So by adding that $60,000, we've cost the taxpayer an additional, based on the average residential assessment, their tax bill would increase an additional $17.50 over the year.
Okay, thank you. Follow up, Councillor Cridland. Okay. Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, I guess we want to put the motion on the floor then to, I'll look to the CAO there, waving at me.
Mr. Mayor, I believe you do have a motion on the floor to bump up, and I don't think the vote has been taken yet.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's correct. We didn't vote on that yet. Thank you. So the motion was to bump the levy from 3.11 to 3.5 with the additional funds going to the infrastructure levy for the future. And we'll go recorded vote. Councillor McClellan. In favor. Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
Councillor Gilmore.
Favor.
Councillor Cridland.
In favor.
And I am in favor, so that is carried. Thank you. And with no further questions, we'll move right into the final motion here for the entire budget. And that's just going up on the screen. We have to just finish filling the numbers in. Okay, would somebody like to make that motion on the screen? I'll read it if you like for the public. Sorry? Right. So the motion is that the presentation by the Treasurer regarding the draft 2021 budget be received, And whereas at its meetings of March 1st, 2021, March 3rd, 2021, and March 8th, 2021, the Council of the Township of Wainfleet has considered and evaluated the operational requirements for the township to ensure the efficient delivery of municipal services to the ratepayers of the Township of wainfleet. Now therefore it be resolved that the 2021 capital budget expenditures of $576,756 be approved, and that the 2021 operating budget be approved with a tax levy requirement of $5,492,458 for local municipal purposes, and that an infrastructure levy in the amount of $976,951 be approved for local municipal purposes, and that staff be directed to report back to council regarding the annual taxation levying bylaw as required by the Municipal Act 2001 upon the setting of the tax ratios and requisition amounts by the regional municipality of Niagara and other applicable bodies. I just wonder if we can clean up the gapping there. There's quite a few words that no space between them. Just so it looks professional. Annual taxation, other applicable on the last line. Operational requirements, fourth line down from the top on the left. Where's the next one? Okay. Thank you. Okay, so that is the motion. Moved by Councillor McClellan, seconded by Councillor Van Vliet. Any further discussion? Okay, Councillor Gilmore, in favor or opposed?
Favor.
Councillor Cridland.
In favor?
Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
And Councillor McClellan. And I am in favor. Our budget this year has been passed. I just want to thank everybody for all the hard work. I know the staff, I spoke about this at the last budget meeting, but the amount of work that goes into this is tremendous. And I know right now they're all going, big sigh of relief that it's passed. So it's a tremendous amount of work. And thank you, Council. We're moving our township in a wonderful direction of financial security and getting things done that need to get done. And it's very good. So I'm very appreciative, and thanks everybody for all the hard work. So there's no closed session. There's nothing else to do this evening. I guess we just have a motion to adjourn, please. And nobody looks too keen. So Councillor Gilmore, Councillor Van Vliet seconds it. And all in favor of adjourning. And that's unanimous. We are now adjourned. Thank you very much.